This is an extended recording of Seattle Suicidewatch. This book was made by Rohit Tallapragada, me myself, and I will also be narrating the whole thing for you to listen to. Seattle Suicidewatch. Part 1. Prologue. Children. We all think about having them, wondering how each day what they'll grow up to be, what great discoveries they might find, what new company they might found. If it was only that simple, eh? It never is, and most of the time, it's a lot worse than people say. Toddlers are easy to manage, but the height of their childhood is in their teens, the most confusing time for anyone's lives. They're at their most influenced and self-conscious time of their lives. Emphasis on the influence. The worst part being, all of us collectively agreeing to pack them in a room and teach them about unnecessary facts and then testing them on it a year later. But what do I know? I'm just a 32-year-old criminal psychologist and a detective for the FBI. The world's a peculiar place, some might say. I don't think so. But it's about as predictable as it gets. When there's a teen suicide in the forest, however, things get dicey, real quick. I like solving cases, but I don't like observing them. In a perfect world, I shouldn't exist, and my job title would sound violent. But people like me exist to catch the people out of line. The worst nightmare for any parent is to lose their beloved child, and I couldn't imagine what it would be like when I read one in the paper. Dated Jan 24th, 2007. Teen 16, found dead hanging from a tree. Teen suicide, local authorities say. End quote. You hear some story like this on the daily. Even to a detective like me, I don't want to look any closer into it than that. The last thing I'd want is to reveal any more information to myself like that. I drank my coffee at the cafe, and I read the news, and I left swiftly to my real job. I get a call not too long after I'm on my road at the police station. The commissioner, Chuck Nielsen, of the Seattle Police Department, on the other line. Tough break there, pal. Chuck was a real stand-up guy. Nothing could have made him flip. All he could ever care about was justice and his family. He busted tons of druggies and sent them to rehab instead of a horrible prison system. That isn't to say he was lenient for crooks. Under him, things really did change for the better. Yeah, when you can't leave me at my job for 5 minutes, I know I'm good at it, I reply. He chuckles. Yeah, right. Anyways, I'll get into it. We got a tip from one of our narcs in the 4th Precinct. 2 hot-headed punks are about to rob the Banner Bank down at 2901 4th Avenue in 3 days. If you're coming, get here as soon as possible. I'm on my way to ready up the files, I replied, and I shut the phone. At least I can get into this bus to clear my mind off that depressing stuff from earlier. I arrive at the station, and before I even get out of the car, I see Chuck running down the stairs to come see me. He's been shot, he yells out. Who? I question him. The goddamn undercover, he yells back. After our short exchange, Chuck proceeds to get inside the car and yell, Step on it, we need to get to Banner now, implying that these punks were going to rob the bank immediately. The roads were completely blocked, but clever Chucky here decided to pack a siren. He rolls down the window and sticks it on the roof. Saved us a few minutes. But when we arrived at the bank, the place was completely empty. We barge in. Police! Put your hands on... We both stand there like fools in the middle of the bank on a busy working afternoon. The bank wasn't hit as of yet. We had some time. Maybe these clumsy bastards got stuck in traffic as well. Didn't think to pack a police siren, huh? We explained to the bank manager to see all the doors and called for backup. About an hour later, we realized that these guys weren't really going to make it. Either they were lazy enough to give up, or smart enough to turn their back after they seen the armed guards here. The guard was called off about a day later. I was given the tapes from the narc's wire. Luckily, everything was recorded over the air. I started listening to them one by one, while everyone else was busy explaining yesterday's debacle. I was just browsing through, looking out for any important details. Lots of blabber about expansion and rival dealer gangs. But then I hear one of them, in a one-on-one conversation, say, I don't know, man. I think this security is quite robust. Plus, I think Winnie's a narc. I can't ever trust this guy. Winnie was the other guy, but he wasn't the cop. I forwarded to the latest tape. All I could hear was, You rat bastard! These cops don't know what's gonna hit them! At first glance, it sounded like a bunch of cocky robbers, but well, Seattle police was wrong, big time. We were the fools all along. Turns out these robbers knew our guy was a cop. They probably hoarded him for information. I called Commissioner Chuck halfway through to warn him about this, but halfway through rallying, I figured showing up would be better. When I arrive, I walk in and meet him, first thing. He listens to my theory about this and asks me what the game plan would be, to which I reply that we need all the records and data linking these guys. Security draw these guys anyway, so we need a discreet undercovers. Piling up everything would be a day's work, so Chuck asks me to take the day off. I didn't have a choice, so I went back home. I fell asleep quickly. The kind of day that I had been would put anyone else to sleep the instant they hit the bed. And I woke up the next day fatigued and in cold sweats to my screeching alarm. I don't know, but I had a nagging feeling that something wasn't right. So I go over the details one more time, but as I look through all the compiled data from the precinct, I find some hardcore guy linked to all of them for 3 grand theft autos, 2 break-ins, and 5 prior robberies. This is our guy, I thought to myself. The police set up radar around the place, and what do you know? He shows up at the bank 4 hours later in a white van. We catch him before he even enters with an M4A1 and 8 duffel bags. 2 other perpetrators with the same equipment. After putting him in the back seat of our cruiser, he replies, "These cops, they never learn." I barely pieced together this anti-cop agenda, but unbeknownst to me, they were smarter than I could have even thought. 2 hours later, regular bank activities resumed. A few people were searched and let in, and we were none the wiser. The very next day, the bank lost all power, and the emergency generator kicked back in. After about 30 seconds, the computers restart, and 12 bank accounts were wiped off, $12.5 million total. Wire transfer? No. That could have been traced and reversed. That's when we found out these bastards weren't bank robbers at all. They were computer hackers. Completely self-taught and possibly criminal experts. Their entire data file was fabricated because they weren't on site. They threw us off tangent with random mercenaries they hired, and we realized the people were arrested. They weren't going to be charged or questioned because they didn't do anything illegal. Their lawyers wrote up a fuck ton of paperwork to the DA, and their case was overturned. And even if they weren't, the guns they brought were scale 1-to-1 replicas with BBs. They had orange tips covered in tape. Obviously, these guys were linked, but we couldn't find a single piece of concrete evidence to pin them on. This was back in 2007. Cybersecurity wasn't really any bank's strong suit. The case went on for months, but the whole gang was released, and within a month of protective custody, they fled the country and went off-grid. Since they weren't deemed as flight risks. Jesus. This was one of those career mistakes that you can only bounce back from. So I gave up and left. The final court hearing, though, during recess, a man named Kevin O'Connor pulls me aside and says, "I'm really sorry to bother you, detective, but can I drop an anonymous tip?" I'm not really sure that's any anonymous anymore, but alright, go ahead, I reply. He laughs nervously and continues, "Look, I'm a social studies teacher down at Delridge, and I guess you've heard about the suicide in the woods, right?" "Yeah, it was in the paper a while back. Why, were there any recent developments?" I replied, to which he says, "It wasn't a suicide, that's all I can say. It's my gut feeling. Because I taught this kid, and she just couldn't take her life like that. She didn't seem like that." Well, unfortunately, it's usually the happiest that are the worst on the inside. "With all due respect, sir, I don't really think you can wrap your head around this," I reply. "I can't change your mind, obviously, but this happens to be a lot bigger than it seems. In time, things will reveal themselves," he says and leaves. This man just dropped a bombshell on my desk like nothing. But I guess you really can't start an investigation with some random notion off the top of some guy's head, can you? Well, no, there wasn't a precedented threat, so nothing. Except, I could pursue this case separately. The last thing I want in my career is to have 2 consecutive failures in a lapse of judgment. I weighed my option, to be quite honest. It would be a waste of time. So I went through my active case files instead and worked on a different one. that is the end of part 1, the prologue. Thank you for listening to my audiobook, and you will hear the rest of it soon enough.